can watch your ass.
Disruptor is an early first-person shooter for the Sony PlayStation. It was the inaugural title for Insomniac Studios and had some now infamous talent behind it, such as Ted Price and Mark Cerny. It was originally in development for the 3DO console, but the system's poor sales had the publisher, Universal, switch platforms to the PlayStation. The game's environments are 3D, with enemies and just about everything else as sprites. The story is told in between missions with glorious full-motion video, which was filmed at Universal. I really like this bit from Disruptor's page on Insomniac's old website. Disruptor is this year's most anticipated first-person shooter for the Sony PlayStation. It sounds exciting until you realize how narrow of a scope that is. Disruptor released in 1996, the same year as these powerhouses, so it could really only be the most anticipated anything if you were looking at first-person shooters coming out on the PlayStation in that same year. I'm actually coming to realize why I had never heard of it back in the day. The story is my favorite part, so let's start with that. It's cliched and flawed, but it plays out with real actors and takes me back to sitting on the floor of my sister's room watching episodes of Babylon 5 she had taped with her VCR. Everything from the low-budget set design, hello futuristic medical doodad that totally isn't a kitchen whisk, to the acting has a campiness to it which strums my nostalgia string like the first note of Motley Crue's Wild Side. But if this kind of sci-fi camp doesn't hit your particular high note, it might be hard to digest. For starters, we play as a space marine in everything but name. Instead, we are a recruit of the Lightstormers, an elite fighting unit who are dispatched personally by the President of Earth to deliver space justice to space baddies all over the solar system. What makes us special is we are given neural implants which unlock psychic powers to use out in the field. The President himself was once a Lightstormer and served with our father who tragically died in the line of duty. On his orders, we steal a powerful psionic artifact from an alien temple on Mars and then kill a lab of genetic scientists who are trying to create an army of powerful mutants.
We need you to get down there and retrieve their genetic databank.
The President, who I will remind you is in charge of Earth and has an army of highly trained Lightstormers at his beck and call, attempts to murder all of the Lightstormers in order to replace them with an army of what I assume would be untrained mutants, with which he will then take control of Earth. Which again he already controls. I really don't understand this.
You're trying to tell me that President Krieger set me up?
Thanks to a random woman from a generic resistance group, we end up as the lone survivor of the Lightstormer massacre. We go after the President, he captures us and confesses to killing our father, as well as leaving us tied up and alone to a neurologic torture device. We escape, kill the President, become President ourselves, and bag the resistance chick we had only talked to once before this. So yeah, this trope-heavy narrative isn't winning any kind of awards, but like I said, if you were the kind of kid who literally went to a sci-fi camp, it's worth finding the cutscenes on YouTube. They take about 15 minutes to watch. The most important aspect of any shooter is, of course, the weapons you'll be shooting. The guns in Disruptor are imaginative, and this is no surprise when remembering the same studio would later create Ratchet and Clank. Sadly, the weapons here are not as satisfying to use. I won't be talking about all of them, but I will say most guns in the game are some combination of weak, slow firing, or inaccurate. To make matters worse, ammo can be hard to come by and doesn't carry over between stages. The 18mm automatic can be found in a secret in the first stage, and is with you the rest of the game. It's accurate and downs fodder enemies of the first few levels quickly. Around level 4, enemy health pools become deep enough that this weapon becomes a last resort. I had the most fun with the phase repeater, as its high rate of fire and plentiful ammo brought me the closest to feeling like I was embodying the game's motto of think fast, shoot fast, and kick ass. But even this gun isn't without its quirks. It has 3 barrels positioned horizontally, which means 2 of every 3 shots aren't going where you're aiming. The shotgun equivalent weapon, called the AM Blaster, requires you to hold the trigger and charge your shot if you want to deal full damage. But even this isn't a guaranteed one-shot kill on standard human enemies. I am never a fan of weapons that have you charge up after you've pressed the button to fire them. It would be like if the Doom guy pumped the shotgun before he fired instead of after. I mean, I'm not against having sci-fi weapons where they charge instead of reloading, they simply need to shoot when I pull the trigger. There's also a rocket launcher equivalent called the lock-on cannon, which does indeed lock on and fire an enemy tracking projectile. That projectile looks exactly like a cannonball and moves at such a leisurely velocity it's almost agonizing waiting for it to connect. And you will wait for it to connect because you don't want to waste precious ammo. Accompanying the player's arsenal are psionic abilities which range from offensive to defensive and support. The powers are drip-fed to the player throughout the campaign. All of the abilities pull from the same mana pool, which can only be refilled using the Drain ability. Drain slightly damages enemies and causes them to drop electric charges which need to be picked up quickly before they despawn. Shock is a powerful close quarters attack. Heal and shield are self-explanatory. Blast is the BFG of Psi Powers, and then it takes out large groups of clustered enemies. Terror Blast is an even more powerful version that kills enemies through walls at the cost of a quarter your mana pool. For enemy design, they went for quantity over quality, with the back of the box touting 20 intelligent and deadly enemies. For a console shooter back in 1996, they may pass as intelligent. I can't fairly critique that, but I can say there are only two enemy types, melee and ranged. And now that I've said it out loud, I guess that's all you can really have. Some melee enemies charge straight at the player, while others meander in a zigzag pattern to throw off your aim. Ranged enemies stand still to shoot, then wander around a bit in between shots. I can't say I expect much more, but you have no enemies that fill both roles, like say the Imp from Doom. Players can't look up or down, so enemies that fly have to hover at crosshair height. I mean, their visual design certainly stands out. I'll never forget seeing the Mad Max classroom projector come barreling at me. Or whatever these are. Or whatever these are. Just like the weapons, the enemies are imaginative, and a lot of them look like nothing I've seen in any other shooter. Level design is mostly restrictive corridors with the occasional open arena. I can only think of one stage that had backtracking and switch hunting, rare for when this came out. If you do manage to get lost, there is an auto map that allows you to run around while it's open. With how fast the player moves, I would have appreciated more room to maneuver and dodge, but I wonder if they wanted to block players from speeding past encounters. Did I say the story was my favorite part of the game? I'm going to change that and say it's the level aesthetics and how varied they get. No two stages share an art style, and a few missions have multiple looks to them. My favorite being Mission 6 on Mars. You start on the surface where the notorious draw distance fog is being used as a Martian dust storm. The area is wide open and landmarks are sparse to drive home the disorientation of being in the storm. Eventually you come across an underground alien structure. The fog turns green as you're now traversing illogically twisting walkways over a giant pool of green liquid. Structurally, both the exterior and interior are simplistic, but the execution made it very memorable for me. Here's a small montage of footage so you can see what else the awesome level art and chilling atmosphere has to offer. Being a shooter on PS1, before dual analog controls were normalized, does mean you'll be strafing with shoulder buttons and turning with the D-pad. This could prove to be an insurmountable roadblock even if you did grow up playing shooters this way. For me, this style of control was burned into my brain. The most difficult aspect for me was swapping weapons and psionic powers. You press and hold a shoulder button, then use a D-pad to cycle through your arsenal. This of course means you're at a standstill each time you do this, and no, the action does not pause like in Metal Gear. There's a quick swap button for weapons that goes to your last use, but I could never remember to use it. The end result of underwhelming weapons, clumsy control, and tight corridors is cumbersome gameplay. Throughout my playthrough, mana and health required constant management. This meant in order to survive, I felt forced to use the drain power as much as possible just to have enough mana left over to heal. Even if psionic use was unlimited, switching to a new power or weapon requires the player to stop moving because you need to use the D-pad to choose a new power. Trying to juggle all of this in the middle of a fight was too much for me, so limiting my experimentation helped me develop a rhythm for combat. Despite the issues I've mentioned, I made it halfway through the game without dying. On the game's back half, I found myself beating levels only through trial and error. With the exception of the fast-paced and fun-as-balls 8th stage, 7 through 13 took pleasure in killing me repeatedly until I memorized which enemies were behind what doors, so that I could very carefully ration my ammo and Psi Powers to deal with encounters in a specific manner. Almost like a point-and-click adventure, I found I could make mistakes early in a level that would later prevent me from finishing it. Having said that, I should make clear I'm personally a very challenge-averse gamer. I can enjoy just barely scraping by on resources, but spending an hour on one stage by repeating the same 15 minutes is enough to make me look up cheats on GameFAQs. A Dark Souls player, I am not. On the audio side of things, the soundtrack is exceptional. The developers took the extra step to give each stage an ambient exploratory track and an intense combat track. Not even my darling Medal of Honor, which would release 3 years later, can attest to that. I've been hard on the game for its weapon design and control, so I want to make sure to praise it when I can, and I highly recommend giving the soundtrack a listen. There's a playlist on YouTube where you can listen to the whole thing. Definitely seek it out. So my thoughts on Disruptor have ended up as a mixed bag. Despite my hangups, I can't deny that parts of Disruptor are wholly unique and unlike what I've seen in other shooters. Playing the game was at times frustrating, but overall rewarding. If I had played this when it was new, I have no doubt I'd be heralding this game as a hidden gem or forgotten classic, but it's impossible for me to forget the past 24 years of gaming experiences. The team at Insomniac took on the then-emerging genre of first-person shooters and weren't afraid to experiment with it. While it won't be making any best-of lists, Disruptor deserves to be remembered and celebrated. I recommend playing it if you're like me and genuinely enjoy digging through the dusty ruins of gaming's past looking for relics. You'll also need to be comfortable acquiescing to outdated controls. At the very least, check out Insomniac's own YouTube channel where the company founder sat down to play a bit of Disruptor and tell stories of its creation. Hey, Sweaty Rob and his messy desk here. I just wanted to say thank you very much for watching. This video was a bit out of my comfort zone, so I'd appreciate it if you go gentle in the comments. Or don't. I'm not your boss. You can do whatever you want. Check back later for my next review, which will be for another PlayStation title, but it won't be a shooter this time. And again, thank you for watching.